Hi everyone, glad to see you back on the channel. What we are witnessing in Ukraine has crossed yet another grim line, one that the world has sadly seen before but can never accept as normal. When civilian homes become targets, when families are attacked not because of anything they did but simply because of where they live, the message is clear. This is not about military necessity. This is about terror, punishment, and intimidation. Over recent months, Russia's campaign has increasingly shifted toward strikes on residential areas, apartment blocks, villages, and city neighborhoods that have no immediate military value. These attacks are not accidental side effects of war. They are deliberate choices. Night after night, missiles and drones have slammed into civilian neighborhoods. These are places where children sleep, where elderly people live out their final years, where ordinary Ukrainians try to hold on to some sense of normal life despite the chaos around them. The targets are not bases or factories. They are kitchens, bedrooms, stairwells, and courtyards. The goal is psychological as much as physical. It is meant to break morale, to exhaust the population, and to send a signal that nowhere is safe. Russia often claims these strikes are aimed at infrastructure or command centers, but the evidence on the ground tells a different story. Video after video shows shattered apartment buildings, burned cars in parking lots, and rescue workers pulling survivors from rubble. Independent investigations, satellite imagery, and eyewitness accounts repeatedly confirm that these locations had no military presence. Even when air defenses intercept some of the weapons, the debris still falls into residential areas, adding to the destruction. This strategy is not new. It follows a familiar pattern seen in places like Chechnya and Syria, where civilian areas were targeted to force submission. The logic is cruelly simple. If you make life unbearable for the population, you hope the government will be pressured into surrender or concessions. But Ukraine has not responded the way Moscow expected. Instead of collapsing, Ukrainian society has hardened. Each strike on a home has deepened anger and strengthened resolve. For Ukrainians, these attacks are deeply personal. A destroyed house is not just a building. It represents years of work, family memories, and a sense of safety that can never fully be restored. When a missile hits a residential block, it destroys far more than concrete. It tears apart lives. Yet even in the aftermath, Ukrainians continue to rebuild, to help neighbors, and to support their armed forces. The intended fear has instead fueled determination. Ukraine's response to these attacks has been swift and increasingly effective. When civilian areas are targeted, Kyiv does not respond with random retaliation. Instead, Ukraine focuses on precise, calculated strikes aimed at the military systems responsible for launching these attacks. This is where the so-called revenge becomes both instant and brutal, not in the sense of indiscriminate violence, but in its efficiency and impact on Russian military capabilities. Within hours or days of major strikes on civilian homes, Ukraine has often responded by hitting Russian missile launch sites, drone depots, airfields, and command centers. These responses are carefully planned to reduce Russia's ability to carry out further attacks. Long-range drones, precision missiles, and coordinated intelligence sharing have allowed Ukraine to strike deep behind Russian lines. The message is unmistakable. Every attack on civilians carries a cost. Russian airbases that once operated with relative impunity have been forced to adapt. Aircraft are moved constantly, air defenses are stretched thin, and crews are under constant pressure. Fuel depots and ammunition storage sites have become frequent targets. When these facilities are destroyed, it directly limits Russia's capacity to launch further strikes. Each successful Ukrainian operation not only delivers immediate results, but also disrupts future plans. One of the most significant changes in this war has been Ukraine's growing ability to strike far beyond the front lines. Early in the conflict, Ukraine was largely confined to defensive operations. Now, it has developed a sophisticated strike capability that reaches hundreds of kilometers into Russian-controlled territory. This shift has fundamentally altered the balance. Russia can no longer assume its rear areas are safe. The psychological impact on Russian forces is substantial. Soldiers and officers who once believed the war would be fought far from their homes now find themselves under threat. Air raid sirens, explosions, and sudden evacuations have become part of daily life in regions that previously felt untouched. This creates pressure on the Russian leadership from within as civilians begin to question why their cities are no longer secure. Ukraine's strategy is also shaped by international law and global perception. While Russia targets civilian homes, Ukraine emphasizes that its strikes are aimed at legitimate military targets. This distinction matters. It reinforces Ukraine's position as a country defending itself within the bounds of law, while Russia increasingly appears isolated and condemned for its actions. Every documented strike on civilian housing strengthens Ukraine's case on the world stage. The international response has been significant. Each wave of attacks on civilian homes triggers new statements of condemnation, additional sanctions, and further military aid to Ukraine. Air defense systems, ammunition, and intelligence support are often accelerated following particularly deadly strikes. In this way, Russia's strategy backfires. Instead of weakening Ukraine's support, it strengthens it. For the people of Ukraine, the cycle is painfully familiar. An attack destroys homes, kills or injures civilians, and plunges communities into mourning. Almost immediately, the focus shifts to rescue, recovery, and rebuilding. At the same time, news emerges of Ukrainian strikes against Russian military targets. This pattern reinforces a sense of agency. Ukrainians are not helpless victims. They are active defenders of their country. The brutality of Ukraine's response lies in its effectiveness. When a missile launch system is destroyed, it cannot fire again. When a drone factory is hit, production is halted. When a command center is taken out, coordination collapses. These are not symbolic gestures. They have tangible effects on the battlefield and on Russia's ability to sustain its campaign against civilians. Technology has played a critical role in enabling this response. Ukraine has combined Western, supplied systems with domestically produced drones and missiles. The result is a flexible and adaptive arsenal. Some drones are inexpensive and can be launched in large numbers, overwhelming air defenses. Others are more advanced, capable of precise strikes on high-value targets. This layered approach makes it difficult for Russia to defend everything at once. Intelligence sharing has also been crucial. Real-time data from satellites, surveillance aircraft, and ground sources allows Ukraine to identify targets quickly. When a strike on civilians occurs, analysts can trace the launch point, track the units involved, and plan a response. This speed is what makes Ukraine's revenge feel instant. It is not impulsive. It is rapid, informed, and deliberate. Russia's leadership faces a growing dilemma. Continuing to target civilian homes undermines any remaining claims of legitimacy and invites stronger responses. Yet shifting away from this strategy would require admitting failure on the battlefield. The result is a dangerous escalation cycle where attacks on civilians lead to deeper strikes into Russian territory, which in turn provoke further retaliation. Despite this, Ukraine has been careful to avoid actions that would alienate its supporters. Its strikes are framed as defensive measures necessary to stop further civilian casualties. This narrative is supported by evidence and transparency. Journalists are often shown the aftermath of attacks on Ukrainian homes, as well as the military targets hit in response. The contrast is stark and difficult to ignore. For families who have lost everything, the idea of revenge is complex. It is not about hatred or cruelty. It is about justice and prevention. If striking a missile depot prevents future attacks on homes, many see it as a necessary act. This perspective is widely shared across Ukrainian society and has contributed to the country's remarkable unity. The resilience of Ukrainian civilians is one of the most striking aspects of this war. Even as homes are destroyed, communities come together to support each other. Volunteers distribute food, help repair damaged buildings, and provide shelter to those displaced. This social cohesion makes it even harder for Russia's strategy of terror to succeed. At the same time, the emotional toll is immense. Living under constant threat takes a psychological toll that cannot be easily measured. Children grow up with the sound of air raid sirens. Parents make plans for evacuation at a moment's notice, yet life continues. Schools operate in shelters, businesses reopen after strikes, and cultural events persist as acts of defiance. Ukraine's leadership has consistently emphasized that these attacks on homes will not go unanswered. Statements following major strikes often make it clear that responsibility has been identified and consequences will follow. This messaging is aimed not only at Russia, but also at Ukrainians themselves, reinforcing the idea that their suffering is recognized and that action is being taken. The brutality of Ukraine's response is also a warning. It demonstrates that targeting civilians does not weaken Ukraine. It strengthens its resolve and justifies deeper, more far-reaching military action. Each successful strike against Russian military infrastructure serves as proof that Ukraine can and will defend itself. As the war continues, the pattern is likely to persist. Russia's attempts to terrorize the population through attacks on homes will be met with increasingly sophisticated responses. Ukraine's capabilities are growing, not shrinking. With each month, its ability to strike quickly and accurately improves. This dynamic has implications beyond Ukraine. It sends a message to other countries watching closely. Wars in the modern era are not won by destroying civilian homes. Such actions galvanize resistance, attract international support for the victim, and isolate the aggressor. Ukraine's experience is a powerful example of this reality. The human stories behind these events should never be lost. Behind every statistic is a family, a home, a life disrupted or ended. When we talk about revenge being instant and brutal, it is important to remember why it happens. It is a response to very real suffering inflicted on innocent people. Ukraine's actions are driven by a simple objective: stop the attacks, protect the population, restore peace on its own terms. Every missile intercepted, every launch site destroyed, brings that goal a little closer. The cost is high, but the alternative, submission through terror, is unacceptable. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel.